With the upcoming release of Return to Silent Hill, the film adaptation of Silent Hill 2, premiering in January of this month, I thought it would be appropriate to delve into a retrospective covering the entire story of James Sunderland. This will not only be focusing on just his story from the original, but also the various interpretations afterwards and how they hold up to this day. James Sunderland was an everyday man working as an office clerk for a small company, presumably in the city of South Ashfield, trying to make ends meet. His father, Frank Sunderland, was the head apartment superintendent of South Ashfield Heights, which likely saw him and his son have a relatively close relationship. One day, James went to a house party held by a mutual friend and met a girl named Mary Shepherd. The two would talk and get to know one another, creating a bond, and would immediately become infatuated. Eventually, the two would fall in love, resulting in a long-term relationship. During the time they spent together, James would fondly listen to Mary play the piano, as it was one of his favorite pastimes to indulge in. Even though Mary was embarrassed as she wasn't much of a great pianist and was an amateur at best, he still loved seeing her play. At some point in time in their relationship, James and Mary decided to take a trip to the town of Silent Hill, specifically the town of South Vale, as they encountered a brochure advertising the tourist town as a gorgeous mountain landscape with a lake, which shows different sides of its beauty with the passing of each day. Intrigued, they took a chance and visited the town, staying in room 312 of Lakeview Hotel. At the end of their vacation, James brought a video camera, likely to record their trip, where he happened to record Mary, taping a video of her reminiscing about their time in Silent Hill. Mary comments on how this town used to be a sacred place, and tells James to promise they'd both come back together again one day. Suddenly, Mary would cough aggressively. What could be written off as a simple cough would only lead to years of pain and suffering for both James and Mary's relationship. 3 years prior, Mary would tragically be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and while never explicitly stated, the disease is speculated to be melanoma, a serious skin cancer which can be reinforced due to her skin becoming ill and ridden over time. With the aftermath of this tragic news, Mary would not only have to endure this burden, but would often project her pain onto James, lashing out at him in anger, resulting in this verbal and emotional abuse whenever James visited Mary at the hospital to support her. Desperately searching for answers, James would have a conversation with Mary's doctor, asking him if Mary can be cured of her terminal illness and if there's any other solution that could help her. Unfortunately, the doctor would bluntly tell James that there's nothing else they can do, and Mary would only have 3 years left to live. Trying to compensate for time, James would not give up and research endlessly through medical literature for hopefully a successful treatment curing Mary's terminal illness, but would come to find nothing. Realizing the disparity of the situation, James would become defeated and accept the harsh truth that his wife is dying. However, as much as James loved Mary and tried to support her, these visits would become less frequent due to Mary's relentless anger and hostility towards James, which resulted in miscommunication from both of them, permanently putting a strain on the relationship. To cope with his depression and loneliness, James would indulge in drinking alcohol to numb his pain. For James, he slowly began to resent and see Mary as a burden, but deep down, he grieved, as he knew he lost the love of his life and their plans for a full, happy life together. The emotional toll left an everlasting impact on James, resulting in James eventually having a full mental breakdown. This mental episode would see James visiting Mary one last time, looking at her intimately, but with sadness and emptiness in his eyes. As he kisses Mary on the forehead, he abruptly grabs her pillow and suffocates her until she stops screaming and is no longer breathing. James would ultimately kill his wife, Mary. Upon her death, James would carry Mary's corpse and place her body in the back passenger seat of his car, putting a blanket over her body. As he sat in his car, he remembered Mary's wish that she made James promise. James honors her wish and takes Mary to Silent Hill. During the drive to the town of Silent Hill, James would initially have the intentions of committing suicide alongside of Mary's corpse. However, James would experience derealization and would become detached from reality. This would manifest James's denial and selective memory due to the spiritual and supernatural nature of the town of Silent Hill, producing a figment of James's delusions and creating a letter that James believes his wife wrote to him. In this letter, Mary tells James that she is waiting for him in their special place. Indulging in these delusions, James believes that Mary is possibly still alive, but expresses dismay as he talks to himself about the letter Mary wrote to him, lamenting if she is still truly alive, waiting for him. Nevertheless, James commits to finding Mary and travels to the town of South Vale through the forest trail leading to the cemetery. Once arriving at the cemetery, James finds himself wandering aimlessly through the thick fog and finds a young adult teenage girl named Angela Orozco. James slowly creeps up to her in hopes of catching her attention, only to accidentally startle her, causing her to become shocked and confused. James apologizes and tells her that he is lost as he is trying to look for the town of Silent Hill. Angela tells James to go down the road as will lead to the town of Southvale. James thanks Angela, but before he leaves, he is warned by Angela that the town is dangerous as there are monsters roaming the town. However, much to her shock, James nonchalantly states he doesn't care if it's dangerous or not, as he's looking for someone really important to him. Angela comes to relate to James as she mentions she is looking for her mother, while also mentioning her father and brother. As they part ways, James wishes Angela good luck before moving onwards in his journey. Departing from the cemetery, James continues down the trail leading to Southvale. Once arriving in the town, James encounters an ominous trail of blood. Nearby, he can see a mysterious figure walking in the fog. With much curiosity and desperation, James follows this mysterious figure by following the path of blood, leading him to an underpass. As he enters the underpass, James comes to find a monster called the Lying Figure, violently contorting as it devours a person's body. Terrified, James instinctively grabs a makeshift plywood as a weapon, killing the Lying Figure. As he leaves, he finds that his radio is emitting static with a slightly muffled voice that is audible. This voice calls out to James, which only confuses him. Exploring Southvale, James finds an apartment key besides a corpse and uses it at Woodside Apartments. Once inside, James finds a dress that eerily resembles Mary's, holding a flashlight tucked in its dress. Elsewhere in the apartment, James ascends to the 3rd floor to find a key behind a barred gate. As he tries to reach out and retrieve the key, a young little girl kicks the key and steps on James' right hand, laughing childishly as she runs away. With now having to reach the other side, James grabs the handgun from the shopping cart as self-defense before scaling down to the 2nd floor. Once here, James hears a scream that echoes throughout the linear corridors, coming from the north hallway. As he reaches the point of origin, he stumbles upon a red pyramid thing, standing there menacingly behind the barred gate as it watches James intently. In the apartment room next door, James suddenly encounters a corpse lying on a sofa chair as it is faced in front of a TV, emitting static. Much to his shock, as he ponders who would do something so callous and cruel. Navigating more of the hallways, James once again encounters the red pyramid thing, known as Pyramid Head, as it valiantly handles and physically abuses the mannequins. As James panics, he retreats and cowers inside of a closet. Once Pyramid Head finishes torturing the mannequins, it gazes its eyes towards James. As the monster stands in front of the closet, James immediately equips his handgun and fires bullets into its pyramid-shaped helmet. As the monster is seemingly hurt by this action, it retreats. Once gone, James further explores Woodside Apartments, finally acquiring the fire escape key, and exploring more of the 1st floor, where he enters a room where he finds a decayed corpse, stuffed headfirst into a refrigerator. Nearby in the same room, James hears an audible sound of someone vomiting inside of a toilet. As he opens the bathroom door, James finds a young man named Eddie Dombrowski. Eddie panics and assures James that he didn't kill the man he saw by the fridge. James asks Eddie if he knows of the red pyramid thing, but Eddie doesn't know what he's referring to. However, Eddie admits to seeing weird-looking monsters roaming the town. As he departs, James wishes Eddie good luck and hopes he leaves the town safely. After his encounter with Eddie, James uses the fire escape key to find a door that opens to a large gap that borders Woodside Apartments and Blue Creek Apartments. With no other option, James leaps across the gap, entering the next door apartment complex. Once here, James once again finds Angela, laying down depressed and contemplating suicide as she holds her knife intimately. James worries as he witnesses Angela holding her knife and tries to defuse the situation by talking her out of committing the act that she is planning. With some back and forth, James asks Angela if she found her mother, but Angela laments as she comes to no avail in her mother's whereabouts. Angela asks James if he found the person he is looking for, but likewise, James also comes short with finding nothing on his end. James abruptly mentions that his wife is dead, and that he doesn't know why he is looking for her, which scares Angela. As Angela leaves, she asks James if he could hold onto her knife, as she doesn't know what she'll do with it if she's left alone. After this exchange, James finds himself in the stairwell of Blue Creek Apartments, where he encounters Pyramid Head, violently handling a lying figure. As James witnesses this, he reacts quickly and tries to barge open the door to escape, but realizes the door is locked. With nowhere else left to run, James is forced to fight Pyramid Head. After some time, Pyramid Head is defeated and leaves the stairwell as he submerges into the water below. James then finds himself outside on the streets of Southvale, where he finds the young little girl from earlier who stepped on his hand, sitting atop the wall. James asks the young girl what she is doing in Silent Hill and the letter she is holding onto. However, her response is rather vague, but tells James that he didn't love Mary, leaving him shocked as to how she knows Mary. However, before he can get an answer from her, she runs away. Close by, James enters Rosewater Park where he finds a woman peering out to Toluca Lake. James shouts to her, thinking she is Mary, but is mistaken to find that this woman is anything but that. However, James cannot deny that she eerily resembles Mary, exclaiming that she could even be her twin. The woman reveals her name is Maria. Disappointed, James asks Maria if she has happened to have seen Mary. While Maria hasn't seen Mary, she asks James if he remembers another location that she possibly could be at. James recalls the Lakeview Hotel as potentially being the other special place Mary referred to. With now having a new destination in mind, James leaves, with Maria now joining him. Both James and Maria explore West South Vale to eventually stumble upon Pete's Bolorama. Before James enters inside, Maria scoffs at the idea of entering as she hates bowling, leaving James to investigate by himself. While inside, Eddie is seen with the young girl hanging out at the bowling lanes. As Eddie eats pizza, the young girl asks Eddie why he's running away from the cops if he has nothing to hide from them and tells them he's sorry. Eddie retorts by saying that the cops wouldn't listen to him, which is why he chose to run away instead. As James finds Eddie to himself, James asks if he is alone, only to find after that the young girl runs away. Without a moment to lose, James tells Eddie to join him to chase after the young girl. However, Eddie refuses James' request and decides to stay complicit with eating pizza. Before James leaves, Eddie reveals that the young girl's name is Laura. As James regroups with Maria, they both head behind an alleyway. Once here, James finds himself running to a dead end. While defeated, Maria offers to help by unlocking the back door with a spare key, seeing the two enter Heaven's Night. After exiting Heaven's Night, they both find themselves running into Laura by the front entrance of Brookhaven Hospital. As Laura enters the hospital, they decide to continue their pursuit after her, following close behind. Once inside, James and Maria navigate the decrepit hallways of the hospital, seeing James needing to protect Maria by killing off the bubblehead nurses. Afterward, James and Maria find themselves in one of the hospital rooms, where Maria tells James she isn't feeling too well and is tired, presumably due to a hangover. Seeing how fatigued Maria is, James tells her to rest while he continues his search to find Laura. Throughout his search in Brookhaven Hospital, James finds himself on the rooftop to suddenly encounter Pyramid Head. Before he could defend himself, James is met with a huge swing by Pyramid Head's great knife, sending him backwards and falling off the roof onto the floor below. After some time, James wakes up conscious and severely wounded after his fall. Once healed, he continues his search for Laura. Shortly after, James finally finds Laura playing with a teddy bear. James asks Laura how she knows Mary, to which Laura reveals that she and Mary were friends in the hospital a year ago. Much to James's shock, he finds himself in disbelief as he knows Mary died 3 years ago. In a short burst of rage, James calls Laura a liar, but quickly apologizes after realizing his mistake. James tells Laura that they should leave Brookhaven Hospital as it's no place for a little kid. Confused, Laura willingly goes with James. As they leave, Laura remembers that she left a letter from Mary in one of the rooms. Instead of entering herself, Laura has James retrieve the letter instead. However, as James aimlessly wanders in the dark, Laura slams the door behind him. As James desperately struggles to open the door and even begs Laura to open the door for him, he is soon met with the flash lips. With no other option, James is forced to fight and kill off 3 of the monsters. Once they are all defeated, James finds himself awoken in the otherworld Brookhaven Hospital. After some time, James finds himself in the basement where he finds Maria. However, James once again mistakes her as Mary, but is still glad that she is alive. Although, Maria finds James' comment as disingenuous and becomes offended. Maria then guilt-trips James by telling him that he doesn't care about her and only cares about his dead wife. In an emotional state, Maria hugs James intimately and tells him to take care of her. As the moment passes, Maria tells James if he found Laura, and while he did, she ran away. James asks Maria if she personally knows Laura as he finds her to care and worry about her. Maria admits that she doesn't know her personally, but she feels responsible in taking care of her and to make sure she's okay. Once together again, James and Maria both navigate Otherworld Brookhaven Hospital, where they find themselves inside of an elevator playing a game show and having to open a refrigerator to collect an item. Eventually, they're both led down to the stairwell to the basement where they suddenly encounter Pyramid Head. With no other choice but to run away, James and Maria run in the maze-like hallways until they reach the end of the hallway to an elevator awaiting them. As James enters the elevator, Maria trips and falls behind him. In a fit of desperation, James struggles to hold the elevator door open for Maria to enter, but she is soon killed as the great spear plunges into her stomach. As the elevator door closes, James is seen defeated at the loss of Maria, as he's struck with guilt and shame in failing to save her. With no time to grieve, James continues his search throughout Brookhaven Hospital. In a room nearby, he finds the map telling him to head back towards Rosewater Park. As he scrutinizes the map, he sees outside the window Laura wandering outside in the dark. Continuing his search for Mary, James roams Night South Vale, evading the various monsters he previously encountered. After some backtracking, James once again finds himself at Rosewater Park, where he acquires a key to Silent Hill Historical Society as the next place he needs to visit. Once inside the Historical Society, James finds an ominous tunnel that leads downwards into the abyss. Gathering the courage, James continues his descent by navigating linear water-filled hallways, leaping down elongated holes until he reaches Toluca Prison. Once in Toluca Prison, James finds Eddie once again. Eddie is seen talking to himself in a mentally unhinged state, stating that killing a person is no big deal. James is mortified to find a corpse lying beside Eddie, assuming that Eddie killed him due to the revolver he has in his hands. Eddie confesses that he killed the person in self-defense because of the way he looked at him. James berates Eddie for such a violent act that could have been avoided. With tension in the air, Eddie reveals that he was merely joking and leaves shortly after. Confused and taken aback by Eddie's comment and behavior, James decides to continue his journey into Toluca Prison. After acquiring necessary items to open a hatch, James once again has to continuously jump down more deep holes until he reaches an elevator which descends into the labyrinth. Inside the labyrinth, James encounters Maria once again, shocked to see her alive as she sits patiently and calmly behind a jail cell. James remarks that she was stabbed and was killed previously, but much to James's confusion, Maria states that she doesn't remember. Maria then asks James if he remembers the time in Lakeview Hotel, pondering if the videotape he made of their vacation is still there. Confused, James tries to understand if the person in front of him is either Mary or Maria, to which she replies she can be whoever he wants her to be. As he leaves, James tells Maria he will meet up with her soon. James continues his search as he runs aimlessly through the labyrinth where he encounters Pyramid Head and various monsters in his path. Eventually, he stumbles upon a voice that screams down the hallway, believing it is Angela. Worried, he enters a room, discovering Angela cowering in fear as she is harassed by the Abstract Daddy. James is forced to engage in combat with the Abstract Daddy in a confined room where he must use his surroundings carefully or else he'll get pounced on. After a tense battle, James finishes off the Abstract Daddy and ensures Angela's safety. Traumatized by the encounter, Angela viciously attacks the monster in justifiable rage, emotionally driven by the abuse she suffered. James asks Angela to calm herself, which is met with an emotional Angela who mistakes James for wanting to have his way with her. James, pleading to her to believe him, sees Angela continue to scold him, likely due to her disdain towards men, as she suffered sexual abuse in her upbringing from her father and brother. As Angela recollects herself, she taunts James by stating he never loved his wife Mary. As she leaves, James is in disbelief over her comment, as he is certain he always loved his wife. Shortly after, James eventually finds a room that contains Maria. However, he is once again too late as he finds her corpse bedridden. Filled with dread and despair, James sits by her side in defeat and guilt in his failure to save her. James leaves Maria to find a cemetery containing the gravestones of James Sunderland, Eddie Dombrowski, and Angela Orozco. Once down below, James runs down a long, linear corridor to eventually find Eddie inside of a meat locker room. As James asks Eddie what he's doing, Eddie gleefully tells James that the answer to his problems is to kill people who bully him. James ridicules Eddie over his behavior and actions, believing he is not justifiable in committing such a ruthless action over someone who looks mockingly or makes a hurtful comment towards him. Eddie perceives James's comment as him making fun of him, resulting in Eddie threatening James that he will kill him. James is then forced into a gunfight with Eddie, where he has no other option but to kill him. In the second phase of the battle, Eddie reveals that he killed a dog and shot a football player in his knee, to which he joyfully laughs and mocks his victims. James responds with Eddie needing to get help, whereas Eddie recounters him believing they are one and the same, as they were both called to Silent Hill for a reason. After a long, tumultuous battle, James finally kills Eddie. Seeing what he has done, James becomes traumatized to realize he killed another human being. After this encounter, James finds himself at the loading bay with a rowboat. Using the rowboat, James uses a bright light source to navigate the fog across Toluca Lake until he reaches Lakeview Hotel. Inside of the hotel, James encounters Laura inside of the restaurant as he's startled by her as she scares him behind the piano. Laura asks James if he has yet to find Mary, but he comments that he hasn't found her yet. Laura speculates that they will find Mary at Lakeview Hotel, as she remembers reading it from a letter Mary gave to her. James asks Laura if he can read the letter that Mary wrote, which she happily gives to him. In the letter, Mary reveals that she wrote this letter for Laura to read after she passes away, telling Laura to be well and to not be too hard on James, understanding that sometimes he can be hard and difficult to talk to, but deep down, he is a nice person at heart. Mary ends her letter stating that if things were different, she would have adopted Laura and wishes her a happy 8th birthday. With this revelation, James asks Laura when she turned 8 years old, to which she reveals last week. James realizes that Mary couldn't have died 3 years ago if this letter was written recently. As James ponders if Mary is truly still alive waiting for him, Laura remembers that Mary wrote him a letter, to which she forgot. Laura runs off to retrieve the letter, leaving James behind to continue his search for Mary. James explores Lakeview Hotel to eventually collect the videotape and key to room 312. James enters room 312 to insert the videotape and watches the video. On the video, it shows a recording James made of him and Mary in their hotel room, which shows Mary expressing how much she loves Silent Hill, making sure James promises to take them back again one day. Suddenly, the tape transitions to a disturbing recording with James looming over Mary as she lies bedridden in her bed. As James looks at her with sorrow, he kisses her on the forehead and suffocates her with a pillow, killing her. After finishing the tape, James comes to realize what he has done, coming to terms with his guilt and trauma that was manifested to make him understand his actions and understand the truth. Moments after, Laura appears asking James if he has finally found Mary, but James softly tells her that Mary is gone because he killed her. Filled with denial and anger, Laura shouts and hits James, saying that he hates him and asks why he would kill Mary, which sees him quiet with no response. After Laura leaves, James sits alone to himself with nothing but the way he carries, smothering him with guilt for the sins he committed. Sometime later, James hears his radio emit a voice that belongs to Maria, begging James to come find her. With wanting to find a last bit of hope to reconcile and atone for his sins, James ventures onwards throughout the ruins of Lakeview Hotel in his search for Maria. James then stumbles upon Angela, standing alone as fire engulfs the stairwell surrounding her. As James approaches Angela, she reacts to him with joy, believing James is her mother, but soon realizes she is mistaken. Angela thanks James for saving her, but she wishes he didn't, as she doesn't believe she is worth it. Despite James's desperate pleas and protests, Angela accepts her fate as she slowly walks up the stairs to become engulfed in the fire. After this emotional scene, James finds Maria. Maria is seen tied and held captive by the twin pyramid heads, resulting in them plunging the great spear into Maria one final time. Realizing he failed once again in saving Maria, James falls to his knees in defeat. In this revelation, James realizes the true purpose of Pyramid Head, coming to terms that the monster is a manifestation derived from his subconscious desire to receive punishment and judgment for killing Mary. In understanding this, James realizes he doesn't need Pyramid Head anymore, resulting in a battle with the twin Pyramid Heads. After some time, the twin Pyramid Heads use the Great Spear to impale themselves and cease to function as they die. James then enters a long hallway which plays a conversation he and Mary had before she died. In this conversation, James visits Mary at the hospital, offering her flowers. However, Mary rejects his flowers and lashes out at James, telling him she doesn't deserve his flowers as she is disgusting and ugly. Mary then quickly apologizes and begs him to stay with her as she doesn't want to be alone, pleading to him to assure her that she will not die. After this conversation, James ascends a stairwell to then find a woman that resembles Mary. James approaches the woman in excitement, believing it is Mary. However, it's revealed to be Maria portraying herself as Mary, offended to still see him mistaking her as someone else. Maria questions how James could be so callous towards Maria's efforts to give him what he wants. In his response, James accepts that Maria is a manifestation created as one of his 9 delusions, derived from his subconscious and seeking an idealized version of Mary that is alive, due to his unwillingness to let Mary go and accept that she is dead. However, now understanding the truth, James acknowledges this and wants to move on, putting an end to the nightmare. In acknowledging this, Maria reveals her true form and the two engage in one final battle. After one long heartfelt battle, James deals enough damage to incapacitate Maria. As he stands before her, he hesitates to finish her off, but knows it's what he must do. And so, James kills Maria, and thus, ending the nightmare along with it. Moments after, James is seen sitting alongside an ill-ridden Mary in their bedroom of their apartment. James asks Mary for her forgiveness, telling her that he is sorry for what he has done. Mary accepts his apology and tells him that she wished to die. James reveals that the reason why he killed her was not only because of how her disease worsened, but because he hated her as it changed Mary into a different person, and how her actions and behavior took an emotional and mental toll on James. However, Mary doesn't believe James's confession because of how sad he is, knowing deep down he always cared and loved her. Before she dies, Mary gives James her letter she wrote to him, making him promise to her that he goes on to live his life. After reading Mary's letter, James is seen walking alongside Laura in the cemetery, alluding to James adopting Laura and respecting Mary's wishes to live the life he deserves. In Silent Hill 2, there are a total of 6 endings, with each ending serving as its own canonical ending, as it's deliberately left up to interpretation as to how James Sunderland's story is seen fit when it comes to his fate. The other 5 endings are alternate conclusions to his story, much like the previously seen Leave ending. The In Water ending sees James incapable of letting Mary go and living a life without her, unable to make amends and telling her he is sorry for what he has done. James would take Mary's corpse and place it in the passenger seat of his car. As James sits in his car and contemplates, he remembers why he drove to Silent Hill, not solely to pay respects to Mary's wishes, but instead to commit to be with Mary in death. Accepting his fate, James then proceeds to turn on his car's ignition and drives off the observation deck into the depths below into Luca Lake, taking his life and becoming one with Mary. The Maria ending sees James in Rosewater Park, contemplating to himself as he leans on the railing as he stares into Luca Lake. Nearby, Maria appears once again, now resurrected, and asks if he killed Mary. James justifies his actions, believing that the Mary he killed was just an illusion. As James and Maria leave Silent Hill, Maria could be heard coughing, with James commenting how she better do something about that cough, implying that Maria will become ill, much like Mary, repeating the cycle once again. The rebirth ending sees James realizing that he cannot move on without Mary, and that Maria is not enough for him to replace Mary. Because of this, James remembers reading upon the ancient rituals conducted by the natives long ago, where they practice resurrections, reviving a deceased loved one. With this, James is seen on a rowboat with Mary's corpse as he travels to a church on an island, presumably to perform a ritual to resurrect Mary to be with her once again. The UFO ending continues the tradition of the infamous joke endings in each subsequent entry, where the protagonist is adopted by the aliens known as Greys. In Silent Hill 2, James uses the channeling stone in room 302 to summon the Greys. Upon meeting, he is greeted by the first protagonist of Silent Hill 1, Harry Mason. Harry asks James if he has seen a little girl with short black hair. Likewise, James asks Harry if he has seen his wife Mary. Suddenly, James is taken by surprise as the Grey fires the hyperblaster and incapacitates him. James is then abducted by Harry and the Greys. Finally, the dog ending sees another joke ending where James discovers that the true culprit orchestrating the events is a Shiba Inu named Mira the dog. With this bizarre revelation, James falls to his knees in dismay. As he questions reality, Mira comes to console James by licking his face. As to what happens to James Sunderland after Silent Hill 2 is left unknown and intentionally ambiguous that is up for debate, only leaving the endings to fill in the blanks and give us some vague interpretations. However, while there's no definitive conclusion, there are a couple of hints to give some fuel for speculation as to the whereabouts of James Sunderland post Silent Hill 2. In Silent Hill 3, a late-night drive to Silent Hill with Heather Mason and Douglas Cartland see the two converse about their time in Silent Hill. In this conversation, Douglas makes an interesting comment that refers to a missing persons case he worked on during his time as a police detective many years ago, stating that he was looking for a man that disappeared in Silent Hill, but never ended up solving the case. This missing person could be referring to James Sunderland, but it's up to speculation. For a more definitive answer, in Silent Hill 4, there are a couple of connections to Silent Hill 2 that give a more vague implication as to what happened to James Sunderland. His father, Frank Sunderland, is the superintendent of South Ashfield Heights. Interestingly, Frank never mentions James once, even in passing as a reference to his whereabouts. However, in Henry Townsend's apartment in room 302, Henry can interact with a photograph Frank gave him as a gift. Upon interacting, Henry mentions that he remembers hearing from Frank that his son and daughter-in-law disappeared in Silent Hill a few years back. Although James Sunderland's story is over, he would still make quite the appearances in subsequent Silent Hill media afterward. In Silent Hill 3, the UFO ending sees Heather Mason come home to her father, Harry Mason. Harry asks Heather, now going under the name Cheryl, as to what happened, to which she recounts her experience of the events prior. Harry, being the overprotective father he is, wants revenge for what Silent Hill did to her. Meanwhile, James can be seen hiding behind the curtain and also holding up a wooden board for Harry to karate kick. In the comics based off of Silent Hill, titled Hunger, an hour-long motion comic one-shot appearing exclusively on the Silent Hill Experience, sees a brief cameo of James and Mary on a boat, enjoying their time together in Toluca Lake. In Silent Hill Shattered Memories, the UFO ending sees Michael Kaufman, a psychiatrist in this alternate universe, giving therapy to Cheryl Mason. In this therapy session, Kaufman is appalled by Heather's comment, believing that her father, Harry Mason, was abducted by aliens. During mid-conversation, James interrupts the therapy session by accidentally confusing his therapy session for today, when he's actually scheduled for tomorrow. As James leaves, Kaufman mentions that James is one of his therapy patients and hasn't seen his wife in some time. James can also be seen hiding behind Kaufman's office chair as Kaufman turns into a gray and Cheryl turns into Mira the dog. In Silent Hill Downpour, in the surprise ending, Murphy Pendleton can be seen digging a tunnel with a spoon. Eventually, he digs himself out to find a surprise birthday party awaiting him. Amongst the crowd are familiar faces, such as Mary, Laura, the Bubblehead nurses, Heather Mason, Pyramid Head, and finally James Sunderland. In Silent Hill Book of Memories, the joke ending sees a group of friends walking along the streets of Silent Hill. One of the friends, Becca, accidentally sneezes on both James and Mary. Becca apologizes, but Mary reassures her that it's okay. As they leave, James worries about Mary catching something, to which Mary replies she'll be fine. In the post-launch DLC for Silent Hill Book of Memories, there's a cosmetic skin that features a downloadable costume of James Sunderland that the player can wear along with his likeness. The packy slot game, Silent Hill, an adaptation of Silent Hill 2, sees the typical events take place, but also features key differences, such as James and Laura visiting a bar with a working bartender, and a newly exclusive monster called Chariot. In this adaptation, James is completely different compared to his original design, which sees him completely overhauled and updated, but still pertains his overall likeness. In the crossover, Dead by Daylight, the Silent Hill chapter, there's a post-DLC that sees a newly implemented cosmetic of James Sunderland as a playable character, replacing Cheryl Mason as an optional skin. According to the lore, James is pulled into the Dead by Daylight universe by a creature known as the Entity, which forces him to be reunited with Pyramid Head. The recent remake of Silent Hill 2 sees a fully overhauled and built from the ground up reimagining of the original Silent Hill 2, featuring a new script, voice actors, story threads, alternate endings, and reworked puzzles and gameplay. The motion capture and voice actor, Luke Roberts, portrays this adaptation of James Sunderland. According to Blooper Team, they ultimately decided they wanted to depict a more older, mature, and weary iteration of James Sunderland, who suffered from his upbringing and past, serving as the catalyst for his personality and behavior that changed him due to his life experiences. Finally, we reach the most recent iteration, Return to Silent Hill, a film adaptation of Silent Hill 2. In this film, it stars Jeremy Irvine portraying James Sunderland. In this incarnation, James Sunderland is objectively the most revised design of the original and previous iterations. From his attire and likeness alone, feels like a stark contrast from what we previously know and expected. But as to how that would be expressed in film when it comes to adopting the role of James Sunderland, we will have to wait and see.